I learned a little about nuclear war from the air raid drills we had at school, but most of what I knew about the Russians came from the Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoon show on TV. Rocky the Flying Squirrel and his friend Bullwinkle Moose were often called upon to stop the criminal actions of Boris Badinov and his girlfriend Natasha Feital, who had foreign accents and were no good spies from a no good country clearly like Russia. Americans were good, peace-loving people. We had John F. Kennedy, a handsome president with a pretty wife, and we wanted to live freely and play baseball and enjoy life. Russians had an ugly leader who probably wasn't even married. The Russians only wanted to destroy America. Russian people lived in fear of their leaders and probably weren't even allowed to play sports. So it would be too bad if we weren't getting a swimming pool, but maybe a bomb shelter wasn't such a bad thing either. The crisis began when the Russians were trying to send ships filled with missiles and bombers to the tiny island of Cuba, only 90 miles from Florida. Our government told us that the Russians were doing this because they wanted to attack the United States. The situation got worse when the U.S. Navy was sent out to try to stop the Russian ships from landing on Cuba. We were led to believe that if the Russian ships did not turn around, there would be war. As it turned out, the Russian ships did indeed turn around and return to Russia. And we in the United States were told that our actions were purely defensive and that by successfully forcing the Russian ships to go away, we had triumphed over the communists. At no point do I ever remember being told the truth, which is that in this case, the United States was the aggressors. Almost a year before the Cuban Missile Crisis, we had put nuclear missiles in Turkey in case we wanted to attack Moscow. We now know that the Cuban Missile Crisis occurred because the Russians were simply trying to defend themselves against the aggression of the United States. And in fact, it was the communists who triumphed by forcing the United States to remove our missiles from Turkey. This was mostly kept a secret from the American people. Of all the fears I had about our shelter in a nuclear war, perhaps the greatest fear concerned our neighbors. My father had designed the shelter to have 4 beds, 1 for each member of our family. And he had only stocked it with enough food to last 4 people for 2 weeks. In this next scene, my family and I have just climbed down into the bomb shelter. Dad has started to pull down the trap door, but before he can get it closed, the neighbors arrive. From above comes banging and scraping, the sounds of a scuffle. "Richard, let us in!" Someone above shouts frantically, "Don't let us die!" Above us, Dad tries to pull the trapdoor closed, but the people on the other side are trying to pull it open. Dad's teeth are gritted with exertion as he fights to pull the door down. I want to beg him to let the others in, but I don't, because this is something I've been scared of ever since he first told me about the shelter. What if there are dozens of people up there? What if they all try to squeeze in until those of us at the bottom are crushed to death? The trapdoor rises. A thin metal tube slides in and swings around as if trying to hit Dad's arms and break his grip on the underside of the door. It's a pole from the badminton net. I see a tennis racket slide in. They're using it to try to pry the door open. Fingers appear along the edge of the trapdoor. First a few, then more and more, turning white around the fingernails as they pull upwards. Now I can see bare feet, pajama-clad legs, then faces peering in. The door rises another inch. My father is being stretched, the skin of his stomach showing between his pajama top and bottom. He loses his grip and the trapdoor flies open. Light spills in. The badminton pole and tennis racket tumble down on us. Familiar faces crowd around the square opening above. And there's Ronnie and his father, Mr. McGovern and Paula. There's no room, Dad protests. He'll kill us all. The faces above him become determined and grim. People start to climb down the rugs into the shelter. My nightmare is coming true. We're going to be crushed.